Hey guys, welcome back to Creating Your Own Reality podcast. Today I have with me a poet, Ciara Chantelle. Thank you so much for coming on to my podcast, guys. I met Ciara at Voices in Power. I was so captivated by her poetry, by the depth, by her metaphors. It really touched me. I actually just started going back to poetry and poetry events in general because I felt like I needed more substance in my life. And I feel like that's what you were giving. Yes. So thank you so much for coming on to my podcast.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of course. And guys, today Ciara is going to perform a poem for us. Yes. So whenever you're ready, if you feel like you have to get into the zone, you're good.
I feel like I'm always in the zone. So we'll just, so let's see. I think mental health is important. It's always important, but especially like right now with the pandemic. So I think there's a lot of like internal dialogue, especially with like God and just what is going on. So this piece is actually called Bruce Almighty. Have you ever seen that movie?
Mm-hmm.
I love that movie so much. I love it so much. And I watched it again like a year or two ago, and then I wrote this piece like right after watching it. So here it goes. If I could converse with God, he'd have the voice of Morgan Freeman. And he'd be disguised as my weed man because no other guy sees me that often. So after some passing and some coughing, he pauses and tells me that he has an offer. Tells me he heard I've been speaking ill of his will and questioning his purpose. I interrupt like it's not on purpose. I just be reacting to you acting like I'm undeserving or unworthy of more. I'm constantly knocking at your door, calling your phone, getting the tone just to be told by some older folk that you stubborn like me, meaning you gonna answer when you need to and not when I want. So he replies that him and I are gonna trade places. He and his homies will play make pretend and I'm in charge of answering their prayers. I'm like, fine. He like, but keep in mind that this job's biggest payment is just a thank you. And technically no one can really save you except them angels I gave you. So good luck trying to win up me instead of just choosing that path that I made you. That's Bruce Almighty. That is Bruce Almighty.
Oh my gosh. You see, this is what I'm talking about. You're so good. Thank you. I kind of want to start from, when did you start doing poetry?
Wow. All right. So I definitely was the oddball kid. Man, I feel like I started writing poetry as soon as I could start writing. And that's real. I initially started doing like short stories and kind of like fantasy creative writing. When I was a kid, I had this room all the way up in the attic in like this huge house. And it was just like, it was like kind of like the Rapunzel, like fairy tale kind of thing, like the girl locked away in the tower. And I would just like write pieces in there. So I would say like, as far back as I can remember, I would say probably like 7. I know that once I was in school, like I was doing poetry. I was like the A student in all English classes, literature. I was like teacher's pet when it came to reading and writing. And then, I think I believe I started performing in the 9th grade. I was like 13 or 14, and I've been performing since.
Nice. That is so unique. Yeah. I feel like not a lot of artists start that young with poetry, so I love that.
I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that because I thought about that the other day, and I was just like, for poetry, like you hear like actors and actresses, even rappers who are just like, yo, like, you know, my mom or my aunt got me this set, and I just was working on it, and I'm like, wow, I've been doing this for that long, but it's poetry, and not everybody likes poetry, if we could be honest. You know, poetry can be really boring sometimes. So I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, and you're lyrical, and I feel like when I listen to your poems, it's very visual. And like, I'm just trying to figure out how you're able to capture that so eloquently.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If I could be honest, so, like, my writing process is very different in a way that I memorize my pieces before they get written down. So, like, I could be sitting here chilling with you, and we could be talking like in the moment and a line will come to me in my head. And then I'll leave from here and the line will be replaying. And then maybe like 3 or 4 more lines will just come to me. And then from there I can kind of like tackle the piece. So, and I ultimately think that, like when I was a kid and I was in my reading and writing classes, and we would have to write poems. You know, we all had to like read the boring poems in school.
Right.
Whenever we had to like read or write them, my teachers would always just say to me, like write as it like you want to see what you're writing. You want to feel like when you write, you don't want to write, I sat on a red table. Like, what does that table feel like? How does it smell? You know, if you're weird, how does it taste? Kind of thing. So, I do think I don't think that I work on that too much. I think it's more of like a natural kind of spirit thing.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a lot of pressure to kind of maintain that. You know, like oh, I know that people see things when I talk, so this piece I have to make sure that they'll still be able to, you know. Yeah. There's always that. But yeah, I wish I could explain. I will say this. You know, I've had people ask me who are my inspirations for poetry, and you got this on camera, okay? I've never said this in public or out loud. Realistically, no one. So I grew up watching Def Jam poetry. It was huge for me. When I started watching Def Jam poetry, I thought that was like, I can't even articulate seeing that. It just was like, wow, you know, as a writer, just was like, I could do this. Like, I can absolutely do this. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of like the poets from Def Jam poetry, but there's a poet named Black Ice. You should check him out. He's from Philly. And I started watching his videos, and I was like, this guy is crazy good. He's so crazy. But it almost sounded like he was rapping. Like, his metaphors and everything, his lyrics, everything was so great. That's what inspired me. I also had a stepbrother at the time when I was younger, and he would watch a lot of battle rap. And to this day, battle rap is honestly like one of my favorite things to watch. Like, I'm like, you know, like when you go to a guy's house and you're dating, and he probably like, I'm that guy, you know, like, you know, if a guy comes over, I'm like, you want to watch some battle rap? Like, so I feel like if anything, I get my inspiration a lot more from rappers and rap, and especially that whole battle rap scene where it's just so raw and unfiltered, as opposed to like, you know, roses are red and violets are blue kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like there's imagery within the words, and I'm trying to figure out as well, where did, like you talked about mental health. Yeah. So what's your, because I feel like with poetry, at least for me, it comes from a place. It comes from an experience. It comes from like almost sadness, like pain. Or a lot of artists kind of drive, you know what I'm saying? Like they peel back from pain. So I don't know if that's too much of a personal question.
No, you are the girl. You can ask me anything. That's such a great question, because yes, a lot of it I feel like derives from sadness. And this is something else I feel like I often think about, even like right now, going through kind of like a rough transition with like the pandemic and just trying to figure out the next moves. It's kind of just been like, when I'm on the up and up and I'm enjoying life and everything is good, I seem to like lose inspiration a little bit. Like I can't seem to write a poem. But the minute I'm angry or fired up or I'm just like super pissed off, my best pieces come to me. And I remember thinking one day, I was really frustrated about it. And I remember thinking about like Bryson Tiller. I know he does like a lot of like sad R&B. I forgot there's this other artist right now who does like a lot of sad, a woman who does a lot of sad R&B. But I
think Lauryn Hill a little bit.
I'm not sure.
Summer Walker?
Summer Walker. Okay, right? Okay, right? So my thing was just like, I remember, so somebody tweeted, they were just like, I need Bryson Tiller and his girl to break up so he can make a good album again or something like that.
Exactly,
you know?
Yeah.
And I remember reading that, and then sometime after, I just was like, wow. Like, when people come up to me and they talk about the pieces that affected them the most, it's the pieces that were the hardest for me. Like, those realities were the hardest for me. So when somebody comes up to me and they're like, yo, that piece changed my life, that feels so great in the moment, but then I go home and it's just like, yo, I have to suffer to get that. Like, you don't understand what I went through to get that piece out. And like, I take so much joy in performing too, because I can bring like the theatrics to it. And I feel like I could bring more expression as opposed to just like writing and reading it out loud. So that helps kind of like take away from the pain. But yeah, it's definitely a thing where it's just like, man, I kind of want the struggling and the suffering to kind of like stop in my life.
Fair.
But it's just like, what will I write about when that happens, you know? And even the other day, I was just like, no, Ciara, like you can manifest great situations in your life and then write about those situations. Girl, I tried. I tried, and they're just so whack. The pieces are just so bad. And I do think that at some point I'll be able to get to that. But right now, it's just, it's the suffering that people relate to, and it's the, unfortunately. So no, that was a very good point. It does derive from sadness, and you know how like you meet somebody and you're like, oh, you're so cool, you're so beautiful, you're so this, you're that, and then the person is just like, oh no, I'm not. Like, you know, I grew up bad. I grew up like, that's me. Like I'm that kind of person. So it gets kind of hard because like I was the isolated kid. Like I loved reading and writing all day long. And my siblings just weren't into that. I was really, really quiet. I observed the world more than I participated in it. And I got in trouble for that a lot too, for like being weird or like trying to be distant from the family. And I do have a lot of, realistically, like traumas and stuff like that. I've worked through them through years. And I feel like I'm at a nice, good, balanced place right now. Probably not for the rest of my life, but like right now. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I feel, so as a Black woman, like I feel like I have this like constant ongoing becoming story of like trying to overcome so much like that I don't even realize, like me just feeling comfortable. I was talking to Julian in the other episode where I talked about me feeling comfortable in my body and seeing him like dance so freely. It was so amazing to me. And then also seeing your stage presence and how you're able to tap into your mind and create these visuals. And I want to really sort of get to know like what was your becoming story like?
Okay.
In a way, like how were you able to gain the confidence? How were you able to gain like the self-awareness? But you also said you were isolated a lot. And so maybe it was like the isolation. So I'm just kind of trying to pinpoint.
Absolutely. So I feel like there were a couple factors. So I'm biracial. My mother's Puerto Rican, my father is Black, and I grew up in a more so like with my Hispanic side. And I looked different from the kids, even within like my own family, my behaviors, my thought patterns, things. I had a few things that were a little bit different. I got in school, like I was bullied. It was just like I was taller than all of the Puerto Rican girls. I was darker than all the Puerto Rican girls. My hair was thicker. And I was like casted out a lot from like elementary to middle school because of that. And then in my own family, you know, you get things like, oh, Ciara, do your hair, or, you know, why aren't you learning to do this or do that? And my family also was very religious, Catholic. And don't get me wrong, I do love my family. But
if you see this,
if you guys are watching, just very, very religious, very, very big family. That's my mother's side. And then on my father's side, we'll get to that in another episode. But I just will say that that side just wasn't as active and present in my life. So growing up, it just was so much time I had to myself to ask why. Like, why are things the way they are? So, like, why aren't my parents together? Why is my dad with this woman that I hate? Why do her kids treat me this way? Why do the kids at school treat me this way? Why is the government like everything? When you spend that much time alone as a kid, it's imagine like sending like your 5-year-old to like prison without you. You know, I didn't have a lot of parental protection growing up, nor did I have a lot of parental support. So for me, writing was such an escape. To be able to sit down and write a place where animals could talk and they loved you, and, you know, where, I don't know, squirrels could take a bite out of the moon and then to share a piece with you like it was a piece of cookie. Like, to be able to write that and live in that in my own room, I didn't need anything else. I didn't need anybody else. So I think that And that kind of became my whole life. I think that I knew very young, I feel like, what I wanted to master, and I feel like I knew that it was going to be writing, just because that was the only way and only time I could express myself. I was not the child allowed to cry. I'm still not allowed to cry, you know. You go see your parents today, they may give you a hug. We don't do, you know? So it just was like the only time I could literally, you know, if I said I was upset about something, it was just like, oh, this drama queen, or, you know, what is she sad about now? So, yeah, I think the isolation has a lot to do with who I am, and just research. Like, I jokingly say this, it's not a joke. Oh my God, guys, this is not funny, kind of. So, you know how like people go into jail and then they come out and they're like, yo, I read all these books and they're so smart, and they have like, that's always what that was like for me, you know, just like books, and, you know, like, oh guys, like I gotta go in right now, I'll be back in the yard tomorrow, like, you know. But it was always just kind of like this loneliness, this prison of how I got here. And that sounds so sad, but realistically, that's what it is. That's what it is. One of my biggest things right now is I've been looking at everybody else's becoming story, right? And then it's just like, oh, well, that person had the 2-parent household, and that person had the private school, and that person had the support system and the friends and the family. And then I look at my becoming story, and I'm like, yo, all I got is me. Like, all I got. And that's not to say that I've had, like, you know, friends and creatives along the way that who do support me. Absolutely. But just as a woman, just as it's literally just has been me and my writing. Like, it's just the only thing that saves me. Yeah, and I don't know, it's just kind of like the only thing that never fails.
You're like almost, it sounds like you had your caterpillar moment, like in the cocoon, like in a dark place, and then kind of broke out and became this like beautiful artist. And I'm so excited, like,
Appreciate that.
Of course, like, I feel you when it comes to that isolation. I grew up with a single mother, and, you know, she was traveling and commuting. I love you, Mom. But she didn't come home till 9 o'clock at night. So I spent a lot of time alone as well. And you kind of create like this imaginary world as a kid. Yeah. But from that place, it's a lot of art happens. Yeah. And I can see how, you know, this, like we said, pain and darkness also begets something and makes something beautiful. Which is, that's like, whew, it's a double-edged sword, and we can only do so much in one episode. But I just have one more question for you, Ciara. Like, if you could tell, you know, your 16-year-old self a piece of advice or something that you wish you knew, what would you say?
Wow.
Sorry to put you on the spot. It could be anything.
I wish I had 16. My 16-year-old self. As tough as this sounds, you are your only savior. And that's not to put a burden on you. That is to say, have absolute complete faith in yourself, that although you may not find a home, you are always home wherever you go. And that's all realistically that you need. And then, I mean, if you don't have yourself, you got me. You know, you come to me, and I got your back. We always need somebody to be there for us, you know? Yeah. So we got to be there for people the way we needed that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. This episode was really special to me because I'm so excited that I got her here. You know, like, these artists are busy. They don't have a lot of time. And your work is so special. Like, I want you to know that I want you to thrive. I want you to excel. I want you to be able to manifest anything you can in this life because, you know, from a story like yours, you're a warrior. You know, you're made for this. Like, so thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Thank you, Ciara, for coming, and make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, guys. And I'm going to put all of Ciara's information in the description. So make sure you read it. Make sure you click the links, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.